National wealth is precious. It is fragile. We have placed it at risk, and we are placing it at risk again. Remember Lincoln's words, you cannot keep out of trouble by spending more than you earn. Never forget, everybody west of the Mississippi, income taxes go just to pay interest on the debt, and that line is moving east every year. We've got to change that. The new administration is adding to the amount that's financed short-term to create the mirage of a lower deficit, but putting our nation at risk when interest rates go back up. You don't finance long-term projects with short-term debt. You personally would not assume a debt you could not repay. That's what we're doing right now. In this environment, we must have a growing, expanding economy that gives us a growing, expanding job base so that we can have a growing, expanding tax base. People who don't have jobs can't pay taxes. Instead, they draw welfare funded by the taxes of the people who still have jobs. The best paid workers in the United States are in manufacturing. During the 1980s, we lost 2 million manufacturing jobs to Asia alone, and the people who lost their jobs were making $440 a week. If those people have a job today, they're now making about $270 a week. This type of gross mismanagement of our country caused 4 out of 5 families in our country during the 1980s to reduce their standard of living. And this means a reduction in their ability to pay taxes at a time when we are adding trillions to our debt. Washington may not get it, but I'm sure you do. 600,000 manufacturing jobs have already gone to Mexico from the United States. Throughout our country, many manufacturing plants have been closed as a result of this exodus. In order to be a world leader, we must be a manufacturing superpower. The typical Mexican automobile worker has a daily wage of $11.60. This will not pay for food and housing for a family of 5. Mexican workers' salaries fell 65% in real terms during the 1980s. How does Mexico treat its workers compared to our country? The typical worker in Mexico lives in a one-room shack with no plumbing or electricity. His counterpart in the United States is a middle-class citizen who can afford to send his children to college, who lives in a nice home. Many Mexican workers with U.S. companies cannot afford a low-income house and must scavenge cardboard and trash to build their homes. Many Mexican workers make 58 cents an hour, the minimum wage. It would take 200 years to buy a low-income home in Mexico with this wage. Well, what about labor laws? In one strike in Mexico in 1990, dozens of workers were shot and injured by the state police. The plant was shut down, 2,000 workers were fired. Those who remained had to take a 45% pay cut. Doesn't sound like the way we treat workers in the United States. At another factory, 14,000 workers were fired. The union was dissolved. The union leaders signed a new contract without consulting the workers. That wouldn't happen here. At this point, you're probably wondering, who negotiated this agreement that is not in our country's best interest? Our country went to extraordinary efforts to keep the details of the NAFTA negotiations from the American people. The negotiations were conducted in secret. Members of Congress had to go to a secret room to read the agreement as it was being negotiated. Meanwhile, the Mexican government, the Mexican business community, and the U.S. lobbyists representing Mexico knew all the details and provided day-to-day input to make sure that the agreement was optimized in Mexico's favor. When the negotiations were completed, just before the Republican convention, the American people were given a 43-page public relations handout, not the 2,000-page agreement. When the agreement was initialed in October 1992, just before the presidential election, the American people were given only a summary version. The American people were given no additional information when the agreement was signed in late 1992. The complete agreement, and here it is, was not released to the American people until January 20th, 1993. It's now available to you at a cost of $41 a copy. As you look at it, it looks like Webster's Dictionary, so not too many people have read it. but it will determine the fates of millions of working Americans. In summary, our government was not creating a new atomic bomb. The American people had every right to know about this agreement, but we were completely excluded from the details of the negotiation, while the special interests creating this agreement, favoring Mexico, had absolute full access. We have a history of one-sided trade agreements where our country and our people are placed at a distinct disadvantage. Entire industries have been wiped out and shipped overseas as a byproduct of these agreements. Companies, cities, and regions of our country have been severely damaged. At this critical time, our wage and tax bases are deteriorating because of the poorly conceived trade agreements already executed and an adversarial relationship between government and business in our country. Our successful competitors have an intelligent, supportive relationship between government and business. Their trade agreements are shrewdly calculated to benefit their country and their people. Ours are not. Once again, we've been out-traded and out-negotiated by a foreign country with a great deal of help from former U.S. government officials who are now working as foreign lobbyists.